share the screen. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Jerry, and you can find my project on the blog. If you scroll down a bit, it's here. It's called A Relative Musical Encounter. Okay. Prélude. Ludwig. Ludwig is relative. Ludwig was hyper. Lenny. Lenny is a relative. Lenny was hype. Ludwig likes dodecaphony, like Schönberg. Ludwig likes microtonality. Ludwig likes every note to be in precise relation to another, like arpeggios. Ludwig likes precise articulation, like algorithm. Lenny likes fugues, like Bach. Lenny likes the Steinway and Son slightly detuned to Stradivarius. Lenny likes the forceful crescendo decrescent wistfully. Lenny likes notes to relate and synthesize. Approximation, L to L. Drift, L from L. To descend L to virtue. To detox L to antiseptic. L. L.
Wir nähern uns der syrischen Küste und wir essen das Gleiche, wie wenn wir über Frankreich fliegen.
Auf dem Schiff wäre es genauso.
Das gewürfelte Muster des grünen Getreides.
Exposition. Lenny's hands vulgarly pass into moisture. A considerable amount of ointment emit a fragrant odor, which he gently rubs in with a scrupulous movement, with many fatty drops coming, especially from the cellular texture of the ointment, for him to bathe his hands in. The ointment is made from kiki, a fruit that is sown in the fields. Kiki, an unthinkable rarity, a wondrous combination of sweetness and power. The ointment makes up a fundamental ingredient of a peculiar conjunction, with the oval bronze basin embracing it from below. This conjunction nurtures Lenny's eternal spirit. And that eternal spirit molds forever for his mortal child images to remind him of the infinite. Lenny's hands now repeatedly immerse themselves in the ointment with a distinctly bizarre scooping motion. First his left and then his right thumb spread the congruency concentrically away from the center of his palms until they reach his fingertips. An act perceptible as obscure as a shaman's sacrificial fetishes. An experience of spiritual transcendence, a physical transcendence of Lenny's hands into a compound of silky tissue. Insofar as the tongue communicates with others by speech, Lenny's hands can now do so convincingly through the ointment by its odor. A ritualistic habitude before he reaches out to assertively stroke the first notes on his rather uncharacteristically dim Bösendorfer. F-sharp dominant chord, a fugue, exposition. Lenny plays as his vintage mahogany chair with cream-colored leather upholstery gently screeches when he shifts his body weight in order to glide over the notes. Lenny's rehearsal room. Lenny's room is carnal warmth, a coexistence where his Italian marble and weathered woods feel at ease in its presence. A textile skin with all the niches being plastered exuberance, luxuriantly decorated with painted stucco. His room, an eternal yearning for bronze relics, silver ceremonial objects, and columns wrapped in cloth of gold. Kermes minerals can be found next to the ointment flasks on his Bösendorfer's music stand. Lenny's spiritual altarings. Lenny plays a lavishly ornamented low-register D ostinato that gradually mushes into the first motive. Lushing in Ludwig, the music theatre, once strongly antipathic towards Lenny's sound, now eagerly tempers itself to every minute detail of its sonical inhabitant. Infinitely reconstructing and reorganizing, Lenny's proximate surroundings are in constant flux in absence of its former frequencies to comfort and accommodate Lenny's playing. A shift away from calculated execution towards visceral expression. Chanting motifs embracing the full dynamic range. Ornamentations accentuating rhythmic complexities. Canonical disposition of voices in their full magnificence. Now, a pyramidal cascade of rubatos. The pyramidal cascade of Lenny's very notably imprecise, however vivid rubatos, entirely dissolved to lead into the upward crescendo of four rocket-like full-scale accords. And yet, a syncretism of sensitivity keeps his accords from crystallizing into perfect solids, a collection of deliberate dissonances before the eternal silence, the dominant chord. Ludwig, for the proportions were what they should be, everything about it had been designed and calculated by a meticulous mind for purposes of maximum clarity and sound travel. It is precisely the exact audible sound of voices and instruments in the reality of continuous sound waves Ludwig fetishizes about. So as Madrid was once placed in the mathematically absolute center of Spain, so was the Steinway in Ludwig's rehearsal room. And the room a careful construction on the basis of simplex sigillum veri. The interior a reduction to white walls with soundproofed wainscoting, brass strips acting as electrical conduits, suspended lighting fixtures, and supercarded microphones and two-toned chairs. Brisk chrome, synthetic leather. From a logical point of view, the space could not be more reasonable. The sound waves have to reflect perpendicular to the precise walls if wished to be brilliant and clear in articulation. Ludwig's turn. Ludwig brightens the suspended lighting fixtures to 87% power. Ludwig now plays a dodecaphonical arpeggio generated by 3 oscillators, played at 120 BPM at 80 decibel. One tone row appears, then another, and so on, almost like the steady ticking of a metronome. They are merely provided here to shape a certain pattern of expectations, algorithmic selection, autopoietic systems, a well-calculated process through lines of code, sequences of zeros and ones, links and repetitions, scans and databases. Sound creation is synced between all four adjacent walls, each with a perforated screen. Unlike the soundproof wainscoting, these polymer screens refract sound so that the sound waves connect in the central focal point after being equalized to a 110 Hz low pass in order to bypass frequency interference between the generated oscillation and resonating objects in the rehearsal room. Neither the polymer screens nor the wainscoting calibrate toward bodily flesh. Calculated isomorphic partitioning and hexachordal combinations. There is no climax. The arpeggios stop. F-sharp mixolydian chord, variation of a fugue. Reflection, luster, refraction. Luminosity, darkness, color. Softness, absorption, liquidity. Audible clarity of meta sound. The touch is inspired. Lenny's sound moves fuzzily this time. In this particular space, it moves in confused color, and the music was suddenly brassy, evil, haunting, flourishing in high crescendo, wild in gesture, in motion. Did the lower D ostinato already merge into the first F-sharp motive? A reasonable distinction in coloration, variations in texture, Texture as difficult and in some ways as secretive as the vision of potential history which it embodies. Texture consonant with the onstage presence of Ludwig, an alteration of Ludwig. Lenny's play has morphed about half of the soundproof wainscoting into emerald marble panels. The heavy doors deliberately opened up for the textures to delicately infuse each other through mutual resonances. Ludwig Steinway, now with some of Lenny's Kermes minerals unmethodically placed on top of the piano's cast iron frame, desires to move out of its perfect symmetrical positioning so that accidental interference can start to enrich the sound. Ludwig's white walls, coated with velvety felt, fixated with a considerable amount of organic rubber so soft and sticky. The tonne, however, grew on Lenny. The tonne vibrates, Ludwig vibrates, the space quivers in every corner. Lenny notices the absence of the low pass. As he reaches for the low A-sharp diminished trill, it is as all the metallic door handles and railings start to respond. A change of timbre, a gentle resonance, augmenting interference. Spiritual reverberation. So much so that the imperishability of Ludwig can be momentarily questioned. A pyramidal cascade of crescending rubatos, decrescent in eclipsing emotion, yet intent. No dissonance, no eternal silence, no dominant chord, as Ludwig has already started. Lenny's rubatos were mimicked beginning at 6 decibels, so as the hero was left only with the general impression that language is unconsciously continuous. Alpha, beta, and gamma particles inscribe themselves in the soft tissue of the soundscape. Oscillations between the code of utility and the code of beauty. Each 3 decibel increment represents a 100% change in sound pressure. Each sequence tempo increment represents a 100% change in movement. This time, each decibel increase feels significant. Each sequence presents bodies in motion, sound in motion. The arpeggios have been awakened by their individual microcollisions with Lenny's emerald marble. Stereophonic atonality raises the apex of Lenny's melody by a mere halftone. Complemented by the velvety felt, it projects a mountainous sound of the breath of millions, shriveling the grasslands of rationality. A sonical error. Though what can it be but motion? What can it be but metallic emotion? The metallic luster that was clearly describable as moving within grayscale was now almost ivory in color. Metallic interplay between shape-shifting fleshy arpeggios. Chunky pats, dance of a serpent, intense oscillation. The metallic luster approaches some kind of a climax and stops. The stage will not be prepared for the vacuum of silence. Ludwig, the music theater. An island in the city, embodiment of disentanglement, distinct separation from his domain. The impenetrable walls of Ludwig absorb the city's cacophonous hustle. The impenetrable walls of Ludwig surrounded by the gasping anticipation of the appetent gathered. The anticipation cannot be wrong because it was what has taken the curious bunch to the premiere. Patiently they stand, as an indivisible mass, gathered as concentric ripples to the droplet of enigma. The droplet, however, does not grant access for the ripples yet as for the performers to be within each other's uninterrupted profoundness. So outside they wait, the gathered ripples from all kinds of liquids, all stretches of water. The space that has been opened by the tension and expectation of endless speculation has to be filled with no less than ethereal matter. Air of short-lived serenity, the calm before the storm. Just before the serenity turns unbearable, F-sharp dominant tone cluster, accompanied by dodecaphonical staccatos, elevation of a fugue. Reflection, luster, refraction, luminosity, darkness, color, softness, absorption, liquidity, atmospheric density, instability of shape, soul, spirit, breath, ancestors, fire, form, God. Sound space creation in all directions, space creation in a continuum. Rejuvenation of particularities, ondulation of the sun. Evaporation of opaque bodies as objects disappear from sight. The whole, a sophisticated form in sophisticated surroundings, a space, subtracted from the whole, exposition of shifting thicknesses and firmnesses of walls and floors. The walls an organification of a synthetic body, organic bodily tissue deliberately introduce layers of carbonization over fused sheets of metal. The corners of the space, constantly in act of reconstruction between pliable skin and alveolar texture, absurd perforation and disintegration, the instruments, as well as a handful of sumptuous onyx and glass vases, appear to float above ground, perpetually dampened by an indeterminable, strangely fragrant solution reminding of both lubricating saliva and electric liquid. The ceiling is cut open, exposed, oculus, an opening 8.9 meters in diameter that is at the hole's apex. The oculus illuminates, brass strips collected, fused into a colossal euphonium, attaching itself to the oculus, reaching into the troposphere. Exhaustive sound embracing all air particles, composures being made up of the clearness of the sky and moisture of the air, have joined together an indissoluble superficies. Hall of supreme harmony, unity in fluids and solids alike, in compounds and in elements, fluid extravagance. L and L. L is free movement outside any zone of both rational and sensorily apprehension. As L becomes L, movement equals rest, freeing its expressive power once the links that oblige bodily positions to signify fixed emotions are undone. In retrospect, the bodies of L and L not only tend to indicate a world beyond themselves, but the movement beyond their own boundaries, a movement of boundary itself, appeared to be quite central to what their bodies are now. Boundlessness, absurd perforation and disintegration, a precarious balance. How L matured within L, how noble, majestic the proportion. Their bright, vivid colors have finally acquired all their brilliance. The musical hyacinth has risen to an intense variety with bright blue, pink and distinctly yellow sound petals. Kaleidoscopic fireworks of 1,000 suns. Touching the luminous troposphere, glance into the garden of unison, creation and decay. Its flowers breathe parallaxing perfume, its grasses devise celestial white noise, and its birds warbled amid the bloom. Everlasting growth of harmonious birds, fertilized by the scintillating chorus of 600 voices. A pyramidal cascade of crescending yet decrescending rubatos formed by the interplay of LL opens an inconceivable temporal dimension, the duration of time in time. L in L, total synchronicity rings both sharp and explosive and as regular as an atomic metronome, an intensely densified aural landscape. The rhythm is both stable and unstable, 3/4, 4/4, 6/4, 8/4, 4/8, 6/8, 8/8, 9/8, 5/4, 7/8, 12/16. Monophony, micropolyphony, macropolyphony, adagio, andante, moderato, vivace, presto. 80, 112, 168, 324 beats per minute, 10 Hz to 20,000 Hz, the embodiment of matter stability, with a gleaming ethereal outflow of modular systems of coordination, of scientific methods of experimentation, laws of automation precision, of eternal source, matter, the form, the shape, and the arrangement of the visible invisible. Matter's reached an ecstatic climax, a thing of indescribable awe, space and sound, or sound and space, for us to dream there, to be in harmony with the irrationality of the depth. Consonance, eternal sound, awakening of the city. Galamp, Baron.